Welcome everyone to our joint meeting and study session with the City of Traverse City Commission as well as with the DDA Board of Trustees. As we start our meeting this evening, I would like to start this to say we'd like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We want to thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting this land and inspiring us to uphold our responsibilities to do the same. As we go through our meeting and our discussion tonight, may we do so with respect, dignity, patience, and charity for each of us and to each other. We welcome the folks at home that are watching. We are at the NMC's Innovation Center. This is the first time we've been in here. Thank you, NMC, for allowing us to use this room. So with that, following the agenda, we don't have a flag in here, so it's kind of hard to do the Pledge of Allegiance, but let's pretend like there's one back there. And if Michael will lead us in the pledge, I'd appreciate it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great imagination, everybody. Appreciate it. That's right. That's how it works. Okay. With that, we usually on our agenda, is there any announcements from the city manager?
Just that tomorrow evening the city will be attending the Michigan Township Association and receiving a public pat on the back for the good works of working on the Boardman Lake Loop Trail. The mayor will hopefully be with us to help receive that privilege. Thank you, sir.
I'm just there to help hold you guys up. I don't have to do anything except enjoy a good meal. Okay. City Clerk, do you have it on?
Just a couple, all really election related. Of course, this Saturday, the city clerk's office is open from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. to help anyone with an absentee ballot in Michigan now. Everyone in the state has a constitutional right to vote absentee for any reason or no reason at all. If you're not registered to vote, you can bring your driver's license or government-issued photo ID showing your current address, register to vote on the spot, and get an absentee ballot. Those hours, again, are this Saturday, November 5th from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. There will be no city commission meeting on November 7th because it's election eve. And then, of course, the election is Tuesday, November 8th from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., and that's all that I've got.
And we've got tags on everyone, so if you don't vote, we'll know about it. So no, we need everyone to please go to the polls that day. It's our honor to be able to do so in this country. With that, we didn't really officially do roll call. I'm assuming that the clerk and the DDA have done that a silent roll call, so we know who's here or not. So with that, our topic discussion, we only have one item. That is a final draft. I should say it's the final draft report presentation regarding moving downtown forward. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Renzi to introduce the team. And I know Megan Mattel will be part of the team that will be kind of emceeing it from this point on. Megan, it's going to be up to you to make point, and you can MC it. You don't need me to do it. I've watched you in action, so you're in charge. So there you go. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. And I want to thank the DDA Board and the City Commissioners for your time tonight to hear the final draft report for moving downtown forward. Before I turn it over to Brad Siegel and Amanda Kennard from Puma and Megan Motil, I want to give you a step back and identify how this process started. And the DDA Board of Directors entered into an agreement with Progressive Urban Management in January of 2022. They started their work in March. And really the question that we ask as a DDA authority was what's next for downtown and what's next for the DDA. And this draft report identifies that. The process included several components, including a thorough examination of the DDA's current organizational and funding mechanisms, extensive community outreach and engagement to understand communities' priorities and aspirations, a detailed market assessment, along with an examination of best practices throughout the state of Michigan and throughout the United States. The guiding principles and key takeaways contained in the report appear, in my opinion, to be in alignment with or complementary to the City Commission's strategic goals, as well as the DDA's strategic goals and plans, and the community's goals and plans. All three, in my opinion, align and really is identified within this final draft plan. And those key alignments are environmental sustainability and stewardship, attainable and workforce housing, pedestrian-friendly accessibility, and protect local independent businesses. Those were very high priorities for the community. It's identified within your strategic goals and objectives and the DDA's goals and objectives. Furthermore, one of the high priorities is to really identify a service agreement, and that Brad will talk about the need for a base level service agreement that should clearly identify the roles and responsibilities of the city and the roles and responsibilities of the DDA when it comes to service management components. Downtown needs the city, and the city needs the downtown. We need to be proactive and collaborative to be positioned for a strong future. We have so much past success to build from, and I'm glad we're here today to talk through and collaborate and know how we're moving forward into the future. This is an incredibly important time for us being a community and the city of Traverse City as a whole. And I'm grateful for the work that has been done and what we're going to do to move us forward. So with that, I will turn it over to Megan and to introduce and start the process and go through the PowerPoint as well as highlights of the plan itself.
Thank you.
Not going to touch that. Thank you all so much for being here together for this joint meeting. I have the honor of kicking things off by reviewing our agenda for the night and also talking about some high-level takeaways before Brad and Amanda share more detail with you. So tonight we will be reviewing the big questions and answers coming in out of the report for what's next for downtown and what's next for the DDA. In terms of what's next for the downtown, we'll be reviewing the community outreach overview and the themes that came out of all of the listening and the survey work. We'll be reviewing the market assessment key findings and also the key takeaways from both of those efforts. Next, we'll review with you what's next for the DDA. We'll share the guiding principles, which Jean alluded to just now, as well as the capital projects that emerged as priorities, the services, and the funding options and governance options for the DDA to consider, as well as the city. And then we will close by talking about next steps. So the four big key conclusions from the process, moving downtown forward process, are that there are some clear community priorities for future physical public improvements as well as services, that the DDA is not done with its work, there's still a purpose for the DDA, and that its mission should continue. That the DDA would benefit from a refreshed governance and operating structure in order to maximize the way it fulfills its purpose. We'll share details with you tonight about that. And also that new and renewed financing tools will help the community achieve its vision for those priority public infrastructure, physical improvements, and services downtown. So with that in mind, I will turn things over to Amanda Kennard. Thanks, Brad.
Good evening, everyone. In a moment, Amanda's going to walk you through what we heard from community outreach. The presentation tonight is going to be in two parts. So as Jean mentioned earlier, our scope looked at two things. We looked at what's next for downtown, and then we looked at what's next for the DDA. And we'd like to allocate our time tonight in those two sections. So over the next 10, 15 minutes, we'll go through the what's next for downtown, and then we'll pause for discussion and questions. and then we'll end another 10, 15-minute section talking about what's next for the DDA. So with that, I want to introduce and also thank my colleague Amanda Kennard, who's been project manager on this. There have been a lot of balls to juggle on a project of this type, and she's done a great job with that. But Amanda's going to start by giving us a quick overview of what we heard from the community in this process.
Hi everyone, nice to see you all. Like Brad said, I'm going to give you kind of a quick overview of what we've heard from the community throughout the Moving Downtown Forward process. So we met with folks in a variety of different formats. We met individually with downtown stakeholders. We had roundtable meetings while we were on site back in May. We had a working group meeting. And we also had engagement with you all in this room in various formats and a joint session back in June. So in addition to that downtown stakeholder outreach, we also administered a community-wide online survey that got 1,172 responses. So we have more details about all of this outreach that we did throughout the process available on the website, which we will point you all to at the end. But I'll just give you kind of an overview of what we heard here. So one of the things we asked in our interviews, in our group meetings with folks was, what are some strengths of downtown Traverse City? And number one was the storefront economy and the mix of businesses that you have downtown, which also contribute to the second bullet point there, the character and authenticity of downtown. We also heard that the natural amenities you all have is a real strength. So the lower Boardman River, being on the bay, lots of natural amenities for folks to enjoy. There are a lot of reasons to come downtown. There's entertainment in addition to all of the restaurants and retail businesses that you have. There are really good multimodal options to get to and from downtown and within downtown. And then we also heard pretty loud and clear that the DDA stewardship of downtown has been a real strength over time in making downtown the place that it is today. We also asked folks what are some of the challenges facing downtown. Affordability was one we heard first and foremost, both for housing and for storefronts increasingly over time. There's also a lack of consensus around the future of Traverse City and what it should look like. The parking experience was cited as something that is a challenge, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The seasonal nature of tourism, while really strong in the summertime, is a little bit of a challenge in the off-season currently. Retention of those small businesses, sort of related to affordability, is a potential threat moving forward. And then finally, the one-way traffic patterns on some of the streets in downtown is something we heard as a challenge as well. So I'll give you a little bit of an overview of what we heard on the online survey. Like I said, if you want to really dig into the results, we do have that posted on the DDA website. We analyzed all of the questions and also did cross-tabulations by demographics like age, interest in downtown, and things of that nature. So if you're really wanting to dive into the data, we have that available to all of you. But just a cross-section of stakeholders is who we heard from on the online survey. You can see on the slide here we've got a graph showing how folks characterize their interest in downtown. So we really had kind of a mix of folks. 83% of respondents, though, identified as local residents, which is pretty telling, with 58% living in Traverse City and 25% elsewhere in the county. So the first question we asked was, what are the top 3 things that bring people downtown? I don't think there are any huge surprises here, but restaurants and bars, retail, and recreational opportunities were the top 3 responses. We also asked people what they think has gotten better or worse in the last 5 years. So the things at the top of the screen there are things that have gotten better. So general appearance of downtown, the mix of restaurants and nightlife, and pedestrian and bicycle friendliness has also improved according to the survey respondents. The things that have gotten noticeably worse, which are at the bottom of the chart there, were housing options and affordability, the unhoused population, and parking options. So next we kind of pivoted to talking about what folks want to see in the future of downtown. So this was an open-ended question where we asked folks to provide 3 words for what they'd like to see downtown moving forward. The number 1 response was walkable. Next was parking, and there were a variety of ways that was phrased, but folks expressed wanting more parking, easier parking, or free parking. Affordable was another top response, and then clean and safe were the next 2 most popular responses. And then we asked folks in 2 buckets, really, what sort of improvements they'd like to see in downtown moving forward. So this first question is showcasing what physical improvements people want to see looking forward, and then we also asked about services and programs. So the first one here, physical improvements, the number 1 response was improved stormwater and wastewater management, followed by increasing the parking supply, and tied for 3rd were make downtown more pedestrian friendly and accessible, and increase downtown housing options. Like I said, we also asked folks what services are priorities moving forward. The top 3 responses here, affordable and workforce housing at almost 30%, which is pretty remarkable for a survey like this. Help protect and promote local and independent businesses was next, and 3rd was become a national leader in sustainability and climate resilience. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Brad.
Great, thanks, Amanda. So in addition to the community outreach, community survey, we also did an extensive market assessment. So we're looking future for downtown, we're looking at not only what are the priorities of the community, but also where are market forces likely to take downtown in the future as we move forward. In terms of the market assessment, and as Amanda mentioned, there's also a fairly in-depth report in the appendix that's available online and also, I believe, in your packets. We looked at 3 main market areas. We looked at downtown itself, the city of Traverse City, and also 5-county region. We identified some peer cities that are a little bit different from past analyses of Traverse City. We looked at other quality of life destination cities across the country, and also we looked not so much at the city side, but at the city size, but we looked at the region's size, because that's really what's relevant in terms of how the economy works. So looking at cities such as Burlington, Bend, Bozeman, Rapid City, and comparing Traverse City to those destinations in a variety of ways. And then the market assessment itself looks at 4 different dynamics of the regional market. Live is about housing, and then work is about jobs. Shop and dine is retail, visit and stay is hospitality. So in terms of highlights from each of these sections, on Live, we looked at the demographics of the area, and a couple things stuck out to us. One was demographics, and what we found is that Traverse City is a bit of an outlier in terms of your age demographics. An aging city, you can see between 2010 and 2022, the median age in Traverse City increased from 44 to almost 47. It also is the same as you go into the region. So the 5-county region mirrors the city as well. Most destination cities, as illustrated here, are median ages tend to be in their 30s. Another city that we didn't look at, but we're working in currently, Flagstaff, Arizona, median age is 28. So what it tells us, again, is that we have an aging population. And we'll talk about what that means for your economy here in a few minutes. Housing, we're all looking at increasing housing costs in all of these markets. Of the 5 comparables, Traverse City was increasing the 2nd most nationally. This was most evident during the pandemic. Home prices, home values went up by about 50%. That, of course, has stalled out with high interest rates, yet to be determined what the long-term trends are. But there was a giant lack of affordability in this period of time over the last several years. On the work side, we looked at jobs and job creation. Downtown, largest employment sectors here are accommodation, food service, finance and insurance, public administration. You do have a strong knowledge-based economy in downtown Traverse City. So there's about 2,000 knowledge-based jobs here. The finance administration are part of that. It also provides raw material for innovation and really for small business growth that's not retail-oriented for primary jobs. So I think there's a real opportunity here to build on that. Of the peer cities, you're at the high end with these knowledge-based jobs. What the chart shows is jobs per acre in downtown. So you have less jobs per acre of downtown than some of these comparable markets. This is probably where Traverse City is strongest locally, regionally, nationally, is your amazing mix of storefronts. And when we looked at local independent versus chain. This is an issue in a lot of towns. Similar to Traverse City, you'll have a first generation of new investment that is largely small local independent businesses. And then as the community prospers, oftentimes you'll see franchises and chains come in and replace them. Traverse City is incredibly rich right now with a mix of local independent businesses. On our pie chart there, you have 94% of your downtown storefronts are either a unique local independent business or something we call a chainlet. A chainlet is a regional chain. So if you have 5 or 6 locations in the region, we call you a chainlet. But the bottom line here is what a wonderful, unique mix of stores. There is vulnerability there. Rents are increasing. And when we talk to store owners, store managers, they're anxious about the future and whether increasing rents will lead to displacement. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Visit and stay, we looked at the hospitality market, tourism, of course, key economic engine here. A byproduct of this, which is accelerating the housing costs challenge that you have, are short-term rentals. And here you're another outlier in terms of the number of short-term rentals in Traverse City. Again, with your peer cities, you're by far the highest in terms of number of short-term rentals per 1,000 residents. And what this does, it's important for the economy. You want visitors, you want people coming here that rent for short periods of time. But it does take housing supply off the market, and it does tend to increase pressure on prices. So short-term rentals being something that we're flagging in this in terms of aggravating housing affordability in Traverse City. So of the market information, the key conclusions. One, these demographic trends we think are challenging for the future. The combination of an aging population, increasing housing costs, and then this boom in short-term rentals and tourism may be more difficult to sustain over time. And what is most difficult here are the age demographics. Younger generations are needed for a variety of things. So service workers, frontline workers, for innovation, for that knowledge-based economy that we talked about, simply for having families and children. A healthy economic system needs a continuum of ages. So we're flagging that. Secondly, this strong mix of local independent storefronts, really key to downtown's identity. And there is vulnerability there as rents continue to increase within downtown. And then lastly, the third conclusion here from the market information. Additional anchor employers really should be a priority moving forward. We want to make sure we do have primary jobs in Traverse City and in downtown. We do think moving out of the pandemic, you continue to be a prime location for small business growth and attracting small businesses. So the notion of people moving here by choice, bringing their business, starting their business, we think will continue to be an opportunity for primary jobs. So this first section of our presentation, I'll end here with key takeaways. What does all this data mean? All of the surveys that we did, all of this market information that we've compiled, we boil it down to 6 key takeaways. And this is how it influences the future of downtown. What's next for downtown? So takeaway number 1 is just to take a moment and really celebrate the success that we've had as a community. For those who were here 40 years ago when the DDA was formed, Our understanding, this is a very different city. And downtown was a very different downtown. The DDA was formed because there were empty buildings, there were blighted conditions, and for someone who has just parachuted into your town over the last year, it's hard for me to believe the incredible transformation that's happened here. So kudos to the community on this transformation, and also acknowledging that the DDA has had a role in working with property owners, business owners, the city, to help transform your downtown. Takeaway number 2 is despite this vitality, there remain vulnerabilities. There are challenges today in Traverse City that could not have been envisioned 40 years ago. There's a whole new set of challenges. So retaining and supporting small independent businesses, the affordable housing, attainable housing, how infrastructure and investment can support sustainability in all of its dimensions. There are 3 key dimensions to a sustainable ecosystem. One is environmental sustainability. And we are very aware that a top priority of Traverse City is environmental stewardship and also being responsive and a leader in Michigan in climate change and adapting to climate change and also turning it around. But there are also other pillars of sustainability. Economic sustainability. Do we have jobs? Do we have opportunities for all segments of the population? And thirdly, equity. If there's any place in this region that should be welcoming for everyone in the region, it would be downtown. Downtown really is the living room of the whole community. So we make the argument that sustainability in all of its dimensions really can be addressed in downtown. The third takeaway, regional prosperity is really tied to a vital downtown. So the economics of Traverse City do not stop at the city limit line. You're a region, and the whole region is dependent on various elements. You're interdependent on economic vitality throughout the region. We're arguing that downtown is a strong economic engine and anchor for the entire region. And so moving forward, we do feel that keeping downtown vital, keeping the downtown experience accessible is part of that economic development strategy for the region. It's also part of the strategies for attracting a diverse demographic profile here, particularly younger generations. And also, if there's any place in this region where sustainability goals can be met, it is in downtown. It is the place where you can live, where you can work, you can play, you don't need a vehicle, and live that sustainable lifestyle. Takeaway number 4 and 5, actually, is there is alignment in priorities here. So whether it's the City Commission, the DDA Board, or the 1,300 participants in our process, strong alignment about priorities about what's next for downtown. So we divided this into 2 areas because the DDA is not just about capital improvements, it's about services as well. This slide talks about physical improvements. What are those priorities? This community values a pedestrian-friendly and accessible downtown. Environmental stewardship, a shared value by all. Optimizing the parking supply, which if we had 1,300 responses, there's probably 1,280 opinions on how to do that. But optimizing the parking supply remains a priority moving forward. And increasing downtown housing options. Housing affordability is a regional challenge. Downtown is not going to solve it on its own. And in fact, if we can be aggressive about trying to get more affordable housing downtown, the economics of housing are such that we may get dozens or scores of units in downtown, which would be great. But the shortage in the city and this region is in the hundreds and thousands. So we'll talk about how downtown plays in that in terms of working not just downtown, but also with its partners in the city and the region. Takeaway number 5, there's alignment around services. Helping protect and promote local independent businesses. This town really values what we have downtown and this unique mix of businesses. This will be a primary directive of the DDA moving forward. We'll talk more about that. Becoming a national leader for sustainability and climate resilience. in our plan, and how does downtown support the city and the region at large to achieve that goal? Supporting opportunities to address attainable and affordable housing. And also on services, looking at how can we clearly define who does what here. This actually popped up as a big issue as we went through the process. In cities similar to Traverse City and towns and cities that are similar, where you have a DDA, where you have a downtown that has a measure of success, over time it is not unusual that responsibilities start to blur between the city, the local government, and the DDA. DDAs, as problem solvers, start to pick up some of those functions of local government. It's most apparent in areas of maintenance, those types of areas. What we're recommending is that we delineate what is the city's responsibility and what's the DDA's responsibility moving forward. To define the city's responsibility, we've asked the city to chart out what would we deliver downtown if there was no DDA. If the DDA went away tomorrow, what would the city deliver? And then the DDA can provide enhanced services on top of that. That's also something we'll talk about in the second part of our presentation. And then the last takeaway, and actually the last slide for part one of our presentation, all of this data, all of this information, these takeaways suggest to us in item 6 that the DDA's mission continues. Downtown's not done. This is not a finished product. And we're going to recommend a variety of adjustments for the DDA. It's time to pivot. It's time to look at new ways of doing things. But basically, the DDA is still needed to champion downtown into the future. And we will talk about TIF tonight, because I know that's top of mind. We'll talk about that in terms of how TIF could continue. But the key point in the first part of this is if tax increment financing goes away, everything we've talked about, all these improvements that are desired not just by residents of Traverse City, but by the region, and that are key to the economy of the region, all these improvements would be solely the responsibility of the citizens of Traverse City. Right now, that is shared. Those costs, those obligations are shared through the DDA and tax increment financing. So, before we get into what's next for the DDA, we thought we'd pause. Megan, you are here. Yeah. And we would see if there are questions.
Yeah, we just want to pause and see if there are any clarifying questions anyone has, or, yeah, any comments. Yeah.
I've got one. There was a slide about affordable, or about short-term rentals related to housing, and it said 1,500 in the greater Traverse City area. So that kind of piqued my interest as, okay, we know it is a regional issue, but what we have control over with the DDA in the city, what are the numbers specifically in the DDA district and the, city at large versus the regional issue that we know also exists?
Yeah, good question. We have the data in the market assessment. I don't have it in my gray matter at this point, but we do have that data. That per capita number was the city. So where we said you were an outlier in terms of the number of short-term rentals per 1,000 people. That was 30 times 15,000 people. We can do the math. That's about 500 units within the city of Traverse City. And then the remainder would be in Grand Traverse County.
It's about 2%.
I have two follow-up questions similar.
I'm not following the, what'd you say, what's 2%?
I said in regards to the residences and the number of residences that have been converted into short-term rentals, it's 2% of the total residences.
For the city at large?
For the city.
Right. But we also were talking about the DDA district.
Which actually, my question might help with that. So I had two questions. One, and I don't know if you have this data, was we did the new permitting things a couple of years ago. So one of those was tourist home licenses. So some of these rooms, I'm assuming, are rooms that are being rented by someone who lives on the premises as well, because we have several of those licenses out there. So I'd be curious what that breakdown is at some point in relative to the numbers there. And I don't doubt that those other cities probably have that too. But the other question that I had was kind of I meant to ask this, I've been fortunate enough to talk to you all before this presentation a few times, but I forgot to ask, / it didn't occur to me, that what's the percentage square foot or like square mile or however you want to look at it of our downtown or development density versus others? Because we have talked about in the past that those cities are footprint larger, but also I think that can mean when you think about how a city is laid out, the difference between, say, Front Street and 8th Street, which is another economic corridor, is only a couple blocks, where in another city that might be 10 blocks, and that's a bigger, you know, that's more housing, that's more neighborhoods. So I'd be curious about that breakdown in the future of what that, how, and I know this is about the DDA, but also that is kind of how we're all talking about interacting, because there isn't much between the end of the DDA district and the start of another one and residences.
It's actually all in the market assessment. So in the full market assessment, we have a breakdown of the acreage of these other communities that we looked at. It is comparable. It's actually apples to apples. So the total acreage of the downtowns are similar, and then these numbers per acre are all comparable. And that's our market analyst, another individual to credit to, a gentleman by the name of Daniel Makala, who's part of our team. He did that analysis up front before choosing the cities to make sure that we were picking apples to apples and accounting for the difference that you mentioned.
I apologize because I asked the same question this afternoon and I confused myself at this point. The market assessment is what area? Is it always the same depending on the snapshot of the data?
Yeah, the question was what's the geography? I assume you're asking about the data. So most of the market assessment, most of the data is sorted by downtown, which is essentially the DDA boundary. The city of Traverse City is area number 2, and then area number 3 is generally 5-county region. There are some cases where the 5-county data wasn't available that we slimmed down to Grand Traverse County. But in most cases, it's those 3 layers, the sort of micro level, the local level, and the regional.
Okay, so some of the data is close in, some of it might be further out.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And so we went through extra analysis on some of the numbers that surprised us to see if there were some anomalies. So for example, I mentioned the age demographic.
Right.
And we said, whoa, you know, that's kind of high. So how does the city of Traverse City, because it's common for a city to have actually more of an aging demographic than a region. Here, it was across the board. I mean, it really spread out through 5 counties on that data point. There are other data points where there are differences, particularly when you get to income and housing prices, those types of things, where there are differences between these different geographies.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this point? Great, we will move forward into what's next for the meeting.
All right, part 2. So what does all this mean for the DDA? So the research that we did, we then went internally into the DDA. We looked at all the organizational documents. We looked at the history. We looked at the budgets. We looked at where the money comes from, all of that information, and came up with these recommendations for the DDA. The first one, and we thought this was critically important. I can't say that today the DDA necessarily has formal guiding principles. These are guiding principles of where investment, program investment and services moving forward should be directed. I would wager any amount that these guiding principles are very different from what they might have been 40 years ago or 30 years ago when the DDA was formed. So moving forward, if we look at different project opportunities, if we look at designing different public improvements in downtown, if we look at delivering services, we want to look at these investment opportunities essentially to measure up on these 5 different criteria. So number 1, we want to design a great place for all ages and for future generations. So are we thinking about, again, a continuum of age demographics when we're thinking about designing downtown? Do we have places that are as accessible and welcoming for a boomer, someone my age, as it is for a family with small children to come downtown, find things to do, and enjoy the environment? And is it accessible for all? all these different groups? Is it stimulating for all these different age groups? The experience of being downtown. So number one, design a great place for all ages and for future generations. 2, advance environmental sustainability and stewardship. How can we invest in different public improvements, in services, even the way we do things, even in small ways, that advance the agenda of being an environmental steward, being a leader in Michigan, perhaps beyond, in reversing climate change and limiting the resources that we use. So we'll talk about how some of these projects meet that goal as well. Number 3 is critical to the heart and soul of Traverse City, in our view. Protecting, preserving small, local, independent businesses. What a wonderful mix of businesses that we have in this town. Not only local and independent, but you also have retail now outnumbering restaurants 2 to 1. That's unusual in most towns across the country that are prosperous. Restaurants are either even or dominant. So to have retail 2 to 1 with restaurants, it's an ideal mix. So how do we preserve and protect this over time? How do we create more opportunities for people to start businesses down here? And opportunities throughout downtown, not just on Front Street. 4, champion the development of attainable and workforce housing. I mentioned earlier, we're not going to cure our affordable housing deficit downtown, but we do think the DDA can be a strong partner with the city, with the region, to figure out solutions. There's a lot of brain power downtown. You've got your business community is headquartered downtown, and we're really suggesting the DDA could be a way to bring that sort of business mind, working with civic leaders to solve pressing civic issues, including housing. So we do think the DDA can be a champion of affordable and attainable housing, not just downtown, but throughout the city and the region. And number 5 to us is a reason why DDA exists in the first place, is to support job growth and varied career opportunities, primary jobs for this region. I mentioned earlier, you're a leader in terms of knowledge-based jobs in this downtown. So can we build upon that? So those are 5 guiding principles moving forward. We then applied those guiding principles to a lengthy list of capital projects that are on the menu. So the DDA board had a retreat back in December, identified different project priorities. This city commission has talked about these priorities, and the surveys that we did largely built on that. And we asked the citizens of this community, which of these projects are important to you? So we got priorities from the citizens as well, those 1,300 voices that we heard from. So when you mix that all together, all the different project opportunities and these guiding principles, we came up with some recommendations. So first capital projects and then services. On the capital projects, we feel that these 3 projects together really hit a home run in terms of the guiding principles that I mentioned earlier. So the lower Boardman River improvements, designed back to nature, actually getting rid of some surface parking lots and reintroducing park space, the ability to actually design drainage systems that can improve stormwater and wastewater, some of these issues that were brought up as priorities. Total home run. West End parking structure. This was originally planned to have, you were originally planning for 3 parking structures in your original vision for downtown. The West End parking structure, probably one where folks debate, if we're looking at these guiding principles, how does that really help? Well, in several ways. One, to sustain the business mix. If we're going to support local independent businesses, their employees need places to park, their customers need places to park. Not everyone's going to be able to walk or take the bus to work. If we want primary jobs, we actually do have a constraint today in recruiting larger businesses, employers more than 20 employees. It's really hard to find parking, so having additional parking. Parking can be a great incentive for affordable housing. So some of that parking could be dedicated and allocated to housing in exchange for affordable units.
it's a massive cost on a pro forma for a housing developer if they're going to be building housing down here. And then sustainability, and you're probably looking at me and say, dude, you're crazy. How does parking help sustainability? It helps in the sustainability goal because it allows us to use surface parking lots in a better way. So right now, in the west end of your downtown, there's a lot of asphalt. And if we can go vertical with the parking, have 3-4 stories of parking, then it allows us to better utilize flat lots, whether it's mixed use, whether it's more green space, there's a whole variety of things. So the parking structure, we think, is part of the optimal mix. And then Civic Square, the plan for Civic Square, a central gathering place for this community, a place to activate year-round with a whole variety of programming, and then simple stuff, you know, a playground, an ice rink. In the summer, it can be a fountain. There are a whole variety of things we could do in Civic Square. We think that activation also supports the businesses, also supports the notion of being welcoming for families and younger populations. So again, together, in our analysis, in our conversations with the community, there's a suite of 3 projects that we're recommending really as the next generation of the DDA. There are other civic investments that would also help. We know for many of the merchants and the property owners, heated sidewalks are coveted here. We've worked in Grand Rapids, which has a very extensive heated sidewalk system. Alleyways, activating alleyways, lighting, festive lighting. I mean, so there are a variety of other things, but these 3 big ones we feel are the cornerstone of moving forward. Services. The DDA doesn't just use tax increment financing for capital projects. It also delivers a variety of services that really define the experience of downtown. So marketing, special events, a whole variety of programming for downtown. The gift certificates that folks value here. The parking system. A lot of these things are managed by the DDA. So moving forward, we do think that there are some realignment of some priorities in terms of these services. One, are we protecting and promoting local independent businesses? We need to be more mindful about that than ever. Are we creating opportunities, the greatest opportunities for our small business people to succeed here? Secondly, championing the development of attainable housing. Again, being at that table, being at the table of the city and the region, thinking creatively of how, not only how we create affordable housing, but also where should it be? For example, transit. You do have a bus system here. Do we really look at affordable housing in key locations that's accessible by transit or by bike, other ways of getting around? So the housing is not necessarily in the core of downtown, but it's accessible, and again, those workers who are so critical down here have ways of getting down here. And then also sustainability, climate resilience, also in the services. And I mentioned earlier, there's some small ways that can make a big difference. So for example, we work with a lot of downtowns that get involved in enhanced maintenance of downtown. And they buy products that are environmentally sensitive. So if we are power washing the sidewalk, let's be mindful. Let's be mindful of what soaps are we using? You know, how are we taking graffiti off buildings? So there's a variety of ways that we can bring environmental sustainability into this. There are also services beyond the core mission of the DDA. We address those in the Moving Downtown Forward report. I mentioned earlier in the first part that there's a blurred line between what's the city's responsibility downtown and what's the DDA's responsibility downtown. The good news is there's a common practice from downtowns all over the country to clarify this. It's called a base level of services agreement. What the base level of services agreement is essentially a ledger. It's a 2-column ledger. And on one side of the ledger, the city identifies these are the services we would provide downtown regardless of whether we had a DDA or not. So there are some basic services that cities deliver in downtown areas, whether you got a DDA or not. And then on the other side of the ledger are enhancements. How can the DDA make it better? So do we collect the trash with more frequency? Do we take graffiti off with more expediency? Do we power wash, as is shown on the slide, which is a service that would be an enhanced service? So this base level of service agreement, through our planning process, we actually initiated this discussion with city staff. They are receptive to the exercise. And our recommendation will be this may be one of the first things that we can achieve from this process moving forward. Parking management. The DDA manages the parking system. It essentially has it's reimbursed for the staff time of doing that. We list several alternatives for that in the body of our report. You can potentially privatize this, you can potentially put this in the city. The beauty of having a DDA managing your parking system is they can manage it through the lens of the customer. And they manage it as part of the experience and as thinking about economic development. Private contractors, there have been some really difficult situations where private contractors have done this because they're about profit motive. Sometimes cities, they see parking as infrastructure. They don't see it as economic development. So we do think the DDA managing parking makes sense, but we do list some alternatives within the report. And also edge districts. So West Front Street, 8th Street, there are some areas that have emerged adjacent to downtown. And we talk about how DDA services could potentially expand and be delivered in those areas moving forward. Funding options. So I mentioned earlier, we got into the weeds with our client here, and we looked at the numbers. On capital projects, and again, everything we're talking about is capital and then services. On capital projects, the primary mechanism for capital that has been used in the past is tax increment financing. And we know that that's been a debate in Traverse City moving forward. Do we continue to use tax increment or do we pull the plug on it? In Michigan, your opportunities are limited. There are limited opportunities for funding capital improvements. TIF, tax increment financing, is the only mechanism in Michigan where a region shares in localized improvements and the funding of localized improvements. So we are recommending that TIF 97 be extended, that it be extended with a new moving forward TIF plan. And we allocate several uses for that. The vast majority would be a bond issue for transformative projects, those different capital projects we talked about. DDA operations and services. And also we're introducing the notion of revenue share with taxing partners. There are a variety of taxing partners, including the city. We do feel in the revenue projections that there's room to share back some of these revenues. And that actually could increase fairly significantly through the next generation of TIF. So I'm assuming that will pique a question or two, and we can probe that more in a few minutes. On the services side, we do think there are opportunities to grow and leverage funding. You can go beyond TIF here. So event sponsorships, contracts for services, charitable contributions, particularly if we get into a civic square, a lower Boardman project, there will be amenities and there will be different vertical elements that really afford themselves to a variety of funding. And lastly, I'm almost out of breath, so I'm glad we're on the last slide. So lastly, governance. We looked at how the DDA is operated, how it's run. We think the overall governance structure of the DDA remains the same. The DDA is a quasi-public organization. It's really responsible to the City Commission. That remains the same. That doesn't change. That's by statute. That's by Michigan statute. What we feel can be strengthened here is the DTCA. That is the Merchants Organization currently. Goes back to 1931, the DTCA. That actually blew us away when we got that little factoid. That's a long time ago. It is organized as a nonprofit, a 501c3. We do think, though, the bylaws of DTCA could be strengthened to help it do other things. So diversify funding, be a pathway for broader, more inclusive representation of downtown stakeholders in what goes on downtown. It can be an advocate for downtown and really advocate to city leaders, to the region on issues that are important to downtown. And a stronger nonprofit element of the DDA, it's a national best practice. So in Michigan, we run into that in Grand Rapids, Ann Arbor, And there's some other examples in the report of other best practices. So with that, and again, because I got to take a breath, let's get your questions on what's next for the DDA.
Who has a question about what Brad just covered, about what's next for the DDA? Yes.
Sure, since you kind of queued this up a little bit for us, revenue sharing back from TIF, can you speak a little bit more to that and what that would look like?
Absolutely. So this is actually fairly rare with tax increment financing, that you're in a position where the different entities that contribute to tax increment financing, where you can actually offer some money back, some of the tax money back. So when we started slicing the projected revenues moving forward, if we're going to extend TIF 97, we found that about 75–80% of that budget should be obligated to bonds. We found that about 15–20% to services. But we did identify about 10% that essentially could flow back to the different taxing entities. Now, what does that mean? So the city currently, 53% of the tax increment dollar, so 53 cents on the tax increment dollar comes from the city of Traverse City. The county, a whole variety of other jurisdictions contribute 47 cents on that dollar. So with that 10% slice of the pie, that money actually would flow back. We're projecting by 2028, that could be about $400,000 a year. So the city, that could be a couple $100,000 coming back. And I think also what's intriguing about this notion of a revenue share is it's a slice of the pie that is most prone to grow over the next 30 years. So if we're going another 30 years, if we're issuing bonds, those bonds have a fixed payment. A fixed payment. That payment on the bonds is fixed for 30 years. So if values increase and increment increases, there's the opportunity to share more revenue with those tax employees.
My question. There's a little cohort of comparable cities that you kind of referenced. Presumably, part of why they're comparable is that they struggle with similar problems that we struggled with. I'm curious if you can sort of summarize or maybe share some anecdotes about how they may have addressed the same kind of challenges that we're facing and how successful they've been.
Yeah, really good question, because these cities are struggling with the same dynamics you are here. So I'll start with housing. I think there are some good models in terms of affordable housing and creating opportunities. Sorry, some of these things you may have already done here, so I don't know enough about what we've done as a community. But for example, accessory dwelling units, ADUs. I see some nodding heads. I mean, that's sort of a good way to allow for additional housing units, bring in some general density into neighborhoods. That helps. Being more tolerant of density, and not just downtown, honestly, but throughout the city, throughout the region. Should we be doing more duplexes? Should we be doing more row homes? You know, there's some ways to, again, bring general density in. You've got height restrictions here. We've worked on a number of communities that have provided a bonus for height. So if someone's going to create additional height, there's a community benefit in return for that, and the community benefit could be affordable units. Sure, you can go higher, but X percentage of your building needs to be affordable. So we've seen that. We've also seen on housing, it's got to be addressed in a regional way. You know, your affordability problems don't stop with downtown or the city of Traverse City. This is a regional issue. So are there some regional approaches? There are some novel ones, which I don't think you can do in Michigan. I know in my city, in Colorado, we raised the marijuana tax, and we issued $130 million in bonds for affordable housing. So being creative and innovative and thinking about it. So housing is one. The short-term rental one, and I know this has been talked about, and you guys may have implemented it, but a lot of communities, and particularly I'm from Colorado, a lot of our mountain communities now are instituting caps. So you reach a certain number of them, and the market's capped. A lot of folks don't like that. They think it's heavy-handed, but it does preserve housing stock availability for folks. All these towns are also investing in their downtowns. They're all seeing downtowns as a key amenity again to bring innovation into their community, to create jobs, so that the town isn't just reliant on tourism, or the town just isn't reliant on retirees who love the lifestyle, but we need jobs. We need jobs for people. So there's a lot of focus on all these towns, on primary jobs within downtowns. I can go on, but I'll sort of park it there right now.
Any other questions?
If I could go back to TIF for a second, just checking on, did you look at both Old Town TIF and TIF 97 when you talked about renewal? I mean, I know we're not up for renewal in Old Town, but like, what would you make a recommendation on that as well? And or I guess the second piece is, did you consider, instead of just a straight up renewal with the existing boundaries, but sort of a reconfiguration of what the TIF boundaries look like, maybe a bigger overlay or a different district, or sort of a different scope or size of the TIF boundary?
Yeah, let me start this. Let me alert Gene that I may stumble on this one. So, because it gets into the nuance of Michigan law, what you can and can't do. So, on your first question, we looked primarily at TIF 97 because the Old Town TIF had recently been extended. There's some complications in terms of combining all that or getting that all on the same timetable. So we looked primarily at TIF 97, and our modeling was related to TIF 97. In terms of the district, it's relatively easy to expand the DDA itself, but not the TIF district. The TIF district, I believe, is fixed in its boundary. Correct. Gene nods, so I speak truth. So yeah, the TIF boundary is relatively fixed, while the DDA could expand. Expanding the DDA boundary is important because areas like West Front Street, 8th Street, that may be a nice way to get those areas into the umbrella of downtown marketing, promotion, and some of these supplemental maintenance services that we're talking about. So not, that was accurate?
That's accurate.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
And just one more follow-up, is the revenue sharing proposal that you have in here is just based upon TIF 97, correct? It's not based upon revenue sharing from Old Town TIF as well?
Correct. The potential for revenue share really is from TIF 97. The Old Town TIF is, doesn't generate as much and hasn't seen as much investment. Over time, this may be a model that we're creating. So over time, if we really see a surge of investment in the Old Town TIF area, the notion of revenue share could be a model that comes out of there as well. So this could be a precedent.
Thanks.
To kind of dovetail on what you talked about on expansion, maybe the 8th Street corridor or the West Front. So that would entail 0.2 mils for the property owners in those districts, but then there's no money for, neither of the TIFs would fund capital improvements in those. Would there be other avenues?
My understanding is that's an accurate statement. So if we expanded the DDA to those areas, it's actually 2 mils, so they'd be adding an additional 2 mils, which could go into supporting the services side of what the DDA does. But TIF money has to be collected and used for the benefit of those within the boundaries of the TIF.
Okay.
Great, I think we'll go ahead and move forward here with next steps. Take a break? Okay. We're gonna let Brad take a breather here, his poor voice. So in terms of next steps, we have the meeting here tonight. We have 2 public information sessions tomorrow. Those are at noon and at 5:30 at the Del Mar Hotel. Please let folks know who you think would like to learn more about this process and the outcomes. We'll be sharing the exact same slides and go through the same process tomorrow with those who come. We do have some public comment forms here in the back of the room, so folks who are here tonight are welcome to fill those out. We also have a QR code that links straight to the DDA website. If you'd like to share your comments online, you can just scan that QR code. It'll take you right to a webpage and a form where you can share your comments there. And just want to pause here by asking you all what you would like your next steps to be as you consider this draft report. So I think I'll turn it back to our mayor, and perhaps you can talk about
I
this.
know at one point, at least this is, in that I get to wear two hats. I'm on the city commission as well as the DDA board. I don't know, getting your feedback from tomorrow's meetings and any other public comments that may come out tonight, and also in the near future, including some that I'll have. And mine are just cosmetic more than anything else at this point. But the other point is it's going to come back to the DDA board. This is their project, and we need to be able to, the board's going to have to say, yes, we like this plan, and then direct staff, if I understand, to work out an implementation plan. I know I shared with 9 and 10 News, this is all not going to happen in 6 months. This is going to happen over a series of years to get this done. So if anyone thinks it's going to happen quickly, they haven't been around city government or DDA government. It just takes a while to get these things done. What I'm hoping is to see a final draft, if it's not this month, because I would like to make sure it is final, instead of having to find more corrections or whatever we want to do, to at least by our December meeting, the DDA board. And then I would like to have it on the city commission's agenda as a received and filed. That way everyone recognizes this is a copy. Now that's my moving steps, and but we may have more comments that we need to include. I know that Brad mentioned a little bit more, and I've got a couple spots in here where we can probably enhance a little bit the idea of climate change and whatever in a certain paragraph, because he stated it, but I think it could be enhanced in a couple of places. But it's those like that, so we all know that we're on the same page. So I'm hoping by December the DDA board will have something they can vote on, if we think so. There's a lot to read here, folks, if you haven't read it. And I haven't gone through all the appendixes yet. I've got to be in a whole different frame of mind to read all those numbers. But I think it's a great opportunity if you want to see what the public thinks or what the demographics are. So.
Thank you.
In fact, the sooner we have the final draft, giving it to us on a Monday and expect to have it voted on a Friday is not going to be the best idea. We need to
Keep that in mind with the pacing.
Yeah, that would be great, because there's a lot of reading in here if you haven't done. It's a good job, but there's still a lot of reading in here to make sure you understand it.
And please do continue to share comments directly with the DDA or through the website. We will read through all of those, and they will help inform the final report. Mr. Chairman, do you have any comments as a?
No, I would concur with the mayor. I think we're on a good track, and I appreciate everybody's input that's sitting around this table into this process. But I would like to come to December pretty much ready to approve something as opposed to providing more input at that point. So use now in December is your opportunity to weigh in and make your comments known so we can have a good finished product to take a look at and consider in December.
I think it's also important that we recognize that over the years, bodies like the DDA and the City Commission have dealt with plans much like this, and many of those plans have been well-intentioned, passed, and never implemented, or at least never fully implemented. It's critical, because our economy depends on it downtown, that we do something with this plan once we approve it. So not only should we approve it, we should have some schedule that we adhere to religiously for implementation of this. Because there are investments being made every day in the downtown that depend on this as their guideline for what they can expect from city government or from the DDA, for that matter.
I would say that once we implement it, or once we have a plan, then we got to be looking to staff and whoever else staff recommends to assist of how they're going to come up with an implementation plan to bring back to us and to the city.
Yep.
To say, here's our plan, how we're going to, like any plans, it may move quicker, it may not move as quick, but at least it's a game plan to move forward. But that's something staff's going to have to sit down along both city and DDA staff to say, when's a reasonable target to be met, instead of saying, I like dates. I like a date certain. Okay, you're going to have something back to us at what date?
Yep.
And they're going to have to figure that out, because once they give us the date, I'm going to hold them to it,
And I would say.
as long as I'm around, so.
And I would just say that I think we have a good model for the start of that with what we did with the better drinking culture, which involved the DDA and the city, where once we got that and we got the results, there was a short-term, 1 to 2 year implementation, longer terms that would be based on the data we collected, as well as any adjustments that had to come from what we were observing. So I think I would be looking for something like that as well. I don't expect the DDA staff or the city staff to move mountains to get everything implemented in 3 years, so it doesn't look like we're giving up on it, to Scott's point, but also to be realistic about where we want to be and how much we want to do before we give ourselves that chance to, much like we talked about with the two-way, kind of analyze what we've got, then re-look at everything and continue to the next phase with that all in mind. So that's what I think would be a great conversation we could all have down the line.
I also think one of the first things that would help both the DDA and the city is coming up with that structure of who's responsible for what. And that way, and the sooner you get that done, especially with budget season coming up next spring, at least that's in place, and we know what everybody has a game plan of what they're supposed to be working with, so, gives everyone a fair shot at it, so. Okay.
Great. So what I'm hearing is you want a final plan with action steps on a short and long-term time frame for the December DDA board meeting that
Well,
would then move.
action steps, not necessarily. A
Just
final
framed up.
draft of this, done.
Just some
but
things framed up for
Then
sequencing.
but also that they're going to have a date when they will have their implementations plan put together.
Great.
And also when they'll have their whatever the term was.
Base level
agreement
service
done.
agreement, yeah.
Base level services agreement, get it done.
Great.
So those are the two short-term things that need to be completed within 90 to 120 days.
Great. Thank you.
I'm just making it up, so I may be wrong, but
I
that's
see a
up to
lot of
them.
people nodding around the table here, so.
Careful what you put out there.
Well, it sounds like folks are on the same page. Any other next steps you'd like us to keep in mind?
I have one last question. One of the things we've talked about is TIF being a revenue-sharing tool. Brad, in your conversations with the other taxing jurisdictions, are they recognizing that they have a moral or ethical responsibility to at least share in some of the costs for the downtown that they use on a regular basis? Because if it's voluntary, we're going to have a problem at times.
Let me say, I'll qualify this because we had a meeting early in the process with your taxing partners. I think there was strong acknowledgement of what's happened to date, that's been successful, that's been of regional benefit. I would say, I characterize it as mixed opinions on whether that should continue for them moving forward. So, acknowledgement that this was a good investment. Downtown is great. But it was before we had collected the data, it's before we had come up with what's next generation of projects. And in fact, we have a meeting tomorrow with taxing partners to sort of talk about this. So when we met with them in the spring, thumbs up on what's happened to date, mixed bag on what's ahead. But we had not defined what's ahead.
Well, I feel like it's always a sign of a good meeting when you end on another question. Because it just means you're making progress and keep asking great questions. So I want to thank you all again for just your leadership on both of these bodies. And I think I'll turn things back over to the mayor and to the clerk for our public input portion of the agenda tonight.
Yeah, we may have you answer some of the questions, so take, if it comes up, please. Okay, if there's no objection, I'm gonna open this for public comment, please, and Mr. Carruthers, good to see you.
I'll just state the rules for public comment. I know Mr. Carruthers is very familiar with them, but for everyone speaking tonight, please state your name and address, indicate if you're a city resident, non-city resident, or city business owner. We've got a 3-minute time allotment. When your time is elapsed, I'll let you know that. And finally, we request that all language be respectful to everyone. Thanks.
Jim Carruthers, 218 West 11th Street, and I'm a city resident. In reviewing the Moving Downtown Forward draft report, I see very little addressing our climate crisis, other than steps to upgrade recycling efforts, something we used to focus on when I was chair of the Grand Traverse Resource Recovery Council, and statements that suggest by engaging with the younger generation, we will somehow become environmentally resilient. The climate crisis is one of the most important issues my generation will face in my lifetime. When I was mayor, I promoted and supported a 100% renewable energy goal for Traverse City, and the City Commission agreed this was the right path forward, and we met our goal. Before that, I helped kickstart our renewable energy program by helping promote a green rate to build the first municipal-grade wind generator here in Traverse City back in the 1990s. I also advocated as a TCLP board member for strong renewable energy goals. We took climate action seriously and began to change the way we think about our future. It now seems like an afterthought. Considering the city owns a public electric utility, I would think that currently we would be more concerned with building distributed generation and an electrification grid that connects all of our municipal buildings and infrastructure, which supports energy independence and carbon reduction opportunities. Babcock Ranch in Florida is a good example of the benefits after Hurricane Ian ravaged South Florida. We could and should be partnering with organizations like NMC here today to be the same and build electrification, energy conservation, and sustainability into every future project. It is up to our leaders to take the lead and do what is best to help slow the climate crisis we are facing as partners as we have accomplished in the past. This is what science is telling us. What we should do and what we should be doing if we truly care about slowing the harsh effects of climate change for future generations. The time is to act now, and our planning should better reflect this. I would also like to speak to the housing goals. For as long as I was mayor, I asked staff at the DDA to provide data on what we actually have downtown. How much square footage of retail, office, restaurant, bar, housing space do we really have downtown? I was always told we are working on that. I've recently been told by real estate professionals that we have over 125,000 square feet of vacant office space. Wouldn't that be a great opportunity to create housing downtown? Retrofitting with energy efficient, sustainable workforce housing in some already built facilities in our downtown region? Seems like a missed opportunity if we're not going to use the facilities that we've already built and construct them with better energy efficiencies for the future. We have that opportunity, and it's downtown now. We must take climate change more seriously through actions and not just through our words and promises. We also must look at our already built infrastructure and consider how it could be used for housing, considering...
Excuse me, Mr. Carruthers, thank you for your comments. Your time has elapsed. Thank you.
Okay. Jim, if you don't mind leaving us your notes, I'll get them back to you.
Good evening. My name is Mike Jackson. For those of you that don't know me, I was a member of the City Commission and served on and off, mostly on, for almost 20 years on the DDA, including 2 years as the chairman. While the chairman of the DDA, I wrote an article about TIF and how valuable it was. I still believe that. It's one of the most valuable tools we have. To extend TIF 97 is not a good idea. It does take a lot of money out of some institutions like NMC, $3.8 million in 2020. You want to tell these students out here we're going to raise their taxes to help, or they raise their tuition to help downtown? Is that what we want to do? I don't think so. I think we want to redo a new TIF and not extend TIF 97. Also, as far as parking goes, no question we need parking in the West End. Again, it was irresponsible, I believe, in the past for us to allow buildings to be built. They're going to house 300-some people on a daily basis without requiring parking. We need to look at private-public partnerships, I believe, as we look at parking in the future in the city. Nothing wrong with looking at a partnership with a private enterprise to help build a parking structure on West Front. So thank you. Thank you for what you're doing.
Anybody else?
My name is Bernie Rubin. I live at 967 Lake Ridge Drive in Traverse City. I'm a city resident. My only question is, you folks, in some of the cities you highlight and other places I've lived, when you talk about the wealth and the opportunities in a community, you focus a lot of times on not just small businesses, but meds and eds, and I didn't hear any discussion about the meds and eds, and I thought that was a missed opportunity. Thank you.
Ann Rogers, 1236 Peninsula Drive, and one thing, if you're going to meet here again, I hope you do something about the sound, because everybody's voice doesn't carry it that well, and I really couldn't hear a lot of you. I hope all of your plans are not set in stone, because the climate breakdown is happening now, and if you pay attention to the national and the international news, you know that there are very serious consequences that are going to impact us, our food supply for one thing. Protecting our environment, our water, our soils, our air is critical, but we have to go beyond that. We have to change ordinances and zoning to reflect more of a community. One of the things that wasn't asked was, what does putting everything downtown, how does that affect the neighborhoods? When I was little, we could walk downtown as an 8-year-old, go swimming, we could walk to the stores, there was a green grocer in every neighborhood, and we didn't have to have a car for everything. The city's been turned over to the automobile like so many other places, and the amount of traffic and the danger of the traffic has impacted all of us. I wouldn't let an 8-year-old walk downtown now. If we want families to come to town, this is something that's going to have to be changed. And it's great to see the kids on bikes and all of that sort of thing, but it's still exceedingly dangerous. So pay attention to the national, the international, and the local needs, please. Thank you.
Might as well have all of us older people up here at the same time. I'm June Thaden, 520 Highland Park Drive. I am a city resident. Climate change is the most vital issue confronting us. The city has a direct statement. Climate change, address climate within all of our city priorities, goals, policies, and actions. Our municipal electric utility, Traverse City Light and Power, has launched a process to combat climate change and to move transition to renewable clean energy as soon as possible. I hear tonight the statement, become a national leader for sustainability and climate resilience. The only place in moving forward I found a similar statement was on page 14. sustainability, and climate resilience. They outline subtle ways for deploying a downtown recycling program, a composting initiative for restaurants, and the use of environmental friendly products for maintenance and cleaning. These are good subtle ways which will help. But where's the strong statement? How about solar panels on roofs? I'm also very concerned about environmental issues, particularly surrounding the treatment of the lower Boardman. Buildings have been built way too close to that river, right hard against it, pull out huge trees that protect the bank in order to put that building right on the river. Makes no sense. The river has rights, and we've been ignoring them. The quality of the river itself is more important than building walkways along it so people can see it closer. A view from the top of the bank is also very effective. I guess that's all I want to say. Oh, parking.
I'm sorry, Ms. Thaden, your time has elapsed. Thank you for your comments.
I limit my trips downtown because it's
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening, I'm Dave Petro. My home address is 9988 Riley Road in Interlochen. I'm one of the outliers who pays that 47% of the TIF money, not the 53% that the city might pay. So I do have a stake in this. And you also should have a stake in this, I recognize, because the city doesn't do a lot to attract people into the city. They're doing more and more all the time to keep us out of it. I think June just brought up the idea of parking. You remember we used to be able to park downtown here at the parking deck for free during the Christmas era. I don't think they do that anymore. And they've raised the rates, and we find other places to go and not to spend money here. This whole DDA thing, seems a little odd to me. The commission doesn't have any, doesn't seem to have any real oversight over it. They don't appoint, I don't know, do you appoint the people there? I know that the people on the DDA are not elected, okay? They are appointed, but they're not elected. And most of them are people who are from the business community, so of course that's your primary goal. The people, the residents of this city have very little interest, and the residents can't even change it. This whole DDA thing, I don't know where it came from. And I think the TIF was voted in, but the DDA wasn't voted in, I don't believe. And how do you get rid of it? A lot of people would like to get rid of the DDA because it's not benefiting the majority of the people in this city, let alone the community outside of it. So just another little thought you should be concerned about. So, oh, and the model cities that the gentleman here is referring to, I don't know how they compare with Traverse City, but Burlington, I think, is Vermont, and Bend, and there are other places. I would be more concerned as to how Traverse City compares with other cities that are local, like Bay City. You go to Bay City, you don't see any parking meters. It's a little bit bigger city than this one. They're on a lake, they're on a river. They have, they don't have any tall buildings higher than four stories. you know, but and they're doing a lot of new building down there and everything else, and they're making money. So how does Traverse City not do that? So anyway, thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name is Blaze Mazarant. I live on 1342 Inwood North in Interlochen, Michigan. First of all, thank you for being here and doing this. I appreciate the work that you do. I like the city of Traverse City. Like they said, the local businesses, the mix there is good, and we've done some good things. I also, I've looked through the documents available online, some of this plan as much as I can. I think those priorities of housing, of sustainability are really important. I appreciate what Scott Hardy said about many times these plans are discussed, they have all this good language, they have all this good intention, but then it doesn't really go that way. And so I really hope and implore that you, stick to that, some kind of implementation schedule. And, it was mentioned that there's like 2,000 knowledge-based jobs in the downtown area or in the city or something like that. There's some great and smart, innovative, clever people in this area who really care about their community, as you can see from people who come up and speak here and so on. And I think there's room for more engagement and more encouragement for citizens to play a role as citizens. A lot of people don't know when these meetings are happening and don't know how to get involved. There's some mention about repurposing the DTCA, and I never heard of the DTCA until now. But if that can become more of a forum where ordinary people can come and weigh in their thoughts, and sometimes those people have some expertise and have some background that can really make a big difference. I think that could help with some of this implementation. It can help to hold, the people here accountable, and to the people and to the plans of what they say that they're going to do. Because there's a lot of great things that have happened, but also, like was mentioned earlier, there's also been some developments that have really damaged the river ecosystems. And I know in this plan, it's been discussed that the Boardman River is really valuable and really important to protect. I think some people kind of feel like there's some opposition or tension between environmental protection and more housing and more density, but I don't think that has to be the case. I think 5-story, 6-story limit is good. We need more density in town. The housing crisis is huge. So keep working with that. I highly recommend working with Housing North. They're a great local organization with a lot of information. There's also a website called about the missing middle, that has a lot of good models. But anyway, that's just some various thoughts. The capital projects that were mentioned here, I think were good ideas. More parking. The Civic Square could really be a good place for more, just to be able to be there with your kids and have it be, like it was stated, we want this to be a place for people of all generations, and for people to be able to come here with their kids and not have to worry about cars, I think would be great. There's a lot of cities that have really great downtowns and really great...
Excuse me, I want to first thank you for your comments, but would you give me a hand and just for the record, spell your first and last name?
Sure, it's Blaseserant.
Great, thank you so much. Yep. Thank you. Thanks for your comments, and your time has elapsed.
Right.
Yes,
thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Levi Muhlenberg. I live at 9789 East Cherry Bend Road in Traverse City. First of all, thank you all for your service to the community. I definitely want to second the sentiments that have been shared already about the climate crisis and needing to really prioritize that and do a lot more, I think, in this planning and looking forward to the future. And I guess I wanted to bring something else to your attention if you aren't already aware of it. It's called energy depletion, or basically energy resource depletion. So it's hard to explain, but the reserves of energy, specifically fossil fuel, which kind of underpin the entire economy, in particular, moving resources all over the place, with diesel fuel on trucks and also moving the workforce around from, the cheaper, more affordable places them having to drive long distances to come in town to work and back and forth. So because of the depletion of these fossil fuel reserves, which are non-renewable, the costs are going to continue going up. We're talking over the next 30 years. And so I think that that's not really being taken into consideration with a lot of this planning. So I'd encourage you to just look into that. There's a thing called energy descent planning. We're just trying to create a plan around, energy descent. You can also just look up energy depletion. It's very much tied into climate change as well, and how we impact the environment. But Richard Heinberg has done a lot of good work on this. So yeah, and so just to put an idea out there, maybe instead of thinking about concentrating lots of resources and funding into one centralized downtown unit, maybe what if we sort of distributed it into, there were 100 mini downtowns in all over the neighborhoods. What about investing in, downtowns like Buckley, nearby Buckley, Kingsley, Kalkaska, other places, rather than having it all sucking into one centralized place. I think that model is going to, and I know that might be beyond your jurisdiction or whatever for this community or this group here, but just to want to put kind of a whole different idea out there for you to think about. So thanks.
Hey, I'm Kevin Summers, 3785 Brook Drive, Garfield Township. I just want to second something our former mayor said. There's a lot of great plans and data and language that has existed over the years, and I would really expect everyone here to push for some kind of comprehensive language that all these plans build on each other. So if we have some ambiguous goal about environmental sustainability or resilience, I would like every plan that use the same definition of what those are, and every new plan to refer back to what the old plan said. People have done a lot of work. I've looked at a lot of plans that have been written and have sat on the shelves. People pay thousands and thousands of dollars to environmental engineers and sustainability professionals, and that work is now outdated and lost, and it's sad. So it'd be great if we could just have these things all build on each other. I mean, you all people spend a lot of time doing this, right? And it shouldn't be citizens' job to remind you to make sure those things are coordinated. So I just appreciate all the work you do, so thank you.
Anyone else? Brad, I don't know if you have any comments that you want to make, but I will make one, is that Traverse City Light Power, as you know, they are working on a climate action plan that they're working on, as well as they are in coordination with the city's green team. At least my expectations that I've shared with both Sarna and as well as Brandy, that I'm hoping that in the spring, they will come back with an action plan that the city can then be engaged in and adopt and move forward with. They're the experts. Us up here, some of us may be experts, but I've read a lot of the same documents and that you have read, especially in the last 2 weeks. There's been a lot of documents out there about the climate in the world. We can only do our part, so I'm looking forward to that. And I do know that working with the DDA in the city, that what comes out of there is what will hopefully will become an action plan that the city can engage in, adopt, and move forward with, and that we would expect all of our agencies to follow in the same plan. So if you want to grant some input, I know Light Power and the green team will be moving forward with that, but that is my expectation. So, and that's what I've asked for, at least from them privately in my discussion. The work's in their hands, so we'll see how that comes about. So thanks.
Mayor, can I?
Yes.
I just want to thank everybody for the comments. I want to thank you for the comments. I wrote down a bunch of stuff. I want to learn about energy descent planning. I wrote down Heinberg. The consistency with plans, we did review the prior plans. We have a summary of the prior plans in the appendix, and we do try to bring forward as much as we can. So I appreciate that, because consultants are pretty bad at doing that. Usually don't. So not guilty as charged. The notion of the the DTCA as a broader forum is exactly what we're proposing. So, yeah, I think a lot of the folks who talked today, that would be the type of thing where you could really innovate and do some cool stuff with that. A couple other quick things. Jim Carruthers, the notion of unused office space to housing, yes. I mean, that's something we talk about in the plan. It's a national trend we're seeing in cities all over the country. So I think we have it in there, and if we don't, we'll make sure it's accentuated more. It's really a spot-on idea. And then Mr. Rubin, I think it was, we do talk about eds and meds in the market assessment. Your economy is heavily reliant on medical. It's actually astounding, the amount of employment in Traverse City. So appreciate that. I do think eds is a great opportunity for you. So I'm officially losing my voice. So thank you all for commenting. I just wanted you to know we took it seriously, and this is the draft, so we can make some changes.
Thank you. Is there any other comments from the board?
I just actually had a quick.
Boards?
I had a quick question, or first a comment that the green team, we had a presentation a couple weeks ago, and we did ask as the city commission, in addition to what's going on at Lake Power with that myself and Tim Warner are on the board with, that we asked them to kind of have a policy summit so that they would look at our policies and make recommendations so that all of our policies are informed by best practices for green energy and everything else that can be sustainable. We have that in our goals and objectives, and I know the city's been kind of working on that, but we're having them look at it larger. We gave them till spring break, I believe it was. Spring. We didn't do quite tied to Earth Day, we did spring break. They are a volunteer board, but they're a volunteer board of experts. So we wanted to give them a little time to get together and go through that. So that'll also be informing a lot of what's going on, as well as mobility plan, the master plan that we're working on, the environmental plan. So if you haven't come to all the meetings in the last week and a half, we don't blame you, but we're all trying to coordinate that together. But I did actually have, sorry to do this to Brad, Jim Carruthers' comment did make me question, and I don't know if that can be part of what we move forward with, and it certainly can be an answer later if you can't do it now. But we just had the IRA passed, which is incentivizing a lot for green energy and changes. So to that end, we don't we don't own as a city those empty office spaces. But will IRA or any of those other projects have any incentives for those unused spaces to be changed to residential in a way that would be beneficial to the owners to want to do it?
Are you referring to the federal
Yes.
climate bill?
Yeah, because we can't do anything at the state level to incentivize them, so can the federal.
And can you, you've got a voice that projects well, but for folks at home, could you come to the microphone?
I'm sorry, it's going to be a quick answer for me, anti-dramatic. I don't know. But one would think that the climate bill was massive, and I would think communities that really prioritize this in their policies will have an advantage, and particularly in areas where you can be a beacon to the large surrounding area, you should have an advantage as well. So I don't know exactly, but I mean, there's a lot of money they approved for a lot of innovation.
We'll all get our heads together on that then, because I think there is too. I think we can do something with that.
I just wanted to say there was a lot of some new faces here, which is nice, and questions about how to know about these meetings and when they're happening. And you can actually sign up with the city for notifications for board meetings that are public that you're interested in. And then you can read past notes from those meetings as well, kind of get you up to speed to what we're doing.
I would strongly recommend everyone read this, at least the first draft. So,
Yeah.
okay. Any other questions or thoughts, comments? Unless y'all just want to stay here and enjoy the nice room.
Well, then can I do one quick comment?
Yes, you may.
Since NMC is so nice to host us, and we were talking about how community oriented we are, there is a maker's market here at the Denos over the weekend for anybody who's watching or not in the audience.
My wife and daughter are very signed up.
Exactly, and so that's a great thing going on here. And then since we don't meet as a city commission until after Shop Your Community Day is Saturday, November 12th. Help support those local businesses. They donate to local charities. There's also a great children's event at the City Opera House that's free and open to the public, a children's literacy event. So there's a lot of great stuff going on to celebrate our community between now and the next time we meet. So I just wanted to give everybody a shout out.
Also, a book sale this weekend at our local library.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I'm on that one.
I know it, you know, unless y'all want to stay here, you can, up to a certain time, but I call this meeting adjourned.
Thanks for saving my bacon, Richard. I would've got